We're starting nice and early while it is still cool. We will finish up our slash pile and then we'll need to finish up with setting the base grade for the pump tank. And then the wall trucks are still here. So at around 8 o'clock they'll come and collect them. We're finally done with chipping this pile. This was the 5th bag and luckily it fit everything. So now I just need to remove these final logs. When we put in the septic tank, we had to do the math to figure out at what depth to put it. And that depended on the grade where the house and utility building is going to be, the distance between the utility building and the septic tank, because that's the longest distance, and how much drop we want, and how high the tank is and how high the inlet is from the ground. So a bunch of math, we figured that out. The second thing we had to figure out is how deep the pump tank needs to go. Now the outlet of the septic tank and the inlet of the pump tank, they are different heights. So actually the pump tank needs to go lower than the septic tank. And also we need to count a little bit of slope between the tanks for the pipe that's going to connect it. So now we need to get the pad completely level at the correct height so that the pump tank can go in. So the pad for the pump tank is done. We have leveled it out flat and certain height below the bottom of that tank as it should be, so we get a little bit of drop where they're gonna connect. And we also mark the corners of where the tank should go. It was always good to measure the actual dimensions of the tank because they're slightly different than what the specs say. So now it's ready for the pump tank to be set in by the excavator. Now on to the next project. Well, truck is gone now and I'm so happy we have a well. And I'm happy about the depth and the flow. And the company, the Benindini Artesian Well Company, was easy to work with. And first of all, they did get back to me when I called around different companies to get a quote for. Throughout the communication has been good. So I'm very pleased with the results.
So we've got the 2 tanks in, the septic tank and the pump tank. They got set, that one a couple of weeks ago, and that one actually got set last Friday. We weren't here at the time, but we had got the pad ready for it to go on, and the company was able to come around, use their truck and lower it into position, and it is exactly where we wanted it. But there's still quite a lot more that we still need to do. You can see this pipe between the two. That's going to link the outlet of the septic tank to the inlet of the pump tank. So that needs plumbing in at some point. Obviously, we also need to plumb something into the inlet of the septic tank. And later on, the pump tank has an outlet on that far side for the pressurized stuff to come out and go up that way. But I can't quite get to that yet. We don't have the trench dug for the inlet. I could put the pipe between the two of them in, but in reality, I don't want to do that because it's going to be quite hard to backfill under there. You can see we still got to backfill quite a lot. And so I don't want to put that pipe in if that's going to make it really hard for the excavator to get in there. So instead, I'm going to leave that out for now. We'll backfill to a little bit closer to the actual pipe level. Then I'll install that. And when I say install, it has a baffle on either end, a filter and a baffle that I need to put in. So I've got all the parts, but I'm not going to do that today. Likewise, I can't start on the pressurized stuff just yet either. But what I am going to start doing is getting this thing insulated. So in the back of the truck, I have 2 sheets of foam board insulation. These were spec'd by our engineer. We need to put insulation on top of the 2 tanks. Here in Vermont, the frost depth is really deep. There will not be enough to keep the top of the tank below the frost depth, although the bottom of the tank is absolutely fine. These are kind of like a belt and braces approach. So I'm going to be cutting out some foam board to fit around these. That means cutting out the circles that you can kind of see in there so they go around the risers. I'm also going to be adding 2 more risers to this tank. So this one came with a 3-foot riser installed. We're going to cut that down to about 2 foot. We're not going to be adding a riser on this hole here. That's going to get buried underground. But on this tank, these two risers, or these two covers, I've got to install 18 inches of risers, a 12 and a 6 on each one, to bring those up to grade. I'm not going to do the one by the outlet, the one nearest the pump tank just yet, because when I do, it's going to make it harder for me to get down in there and install that pipe. So what I can do today is install the insulation board and install the riser on that cover there. So that's my plan for today. The septic tank and the pump tank came with those covers pre-installed. I need to cut out a circle the size of those, and as it happens, as you'd expect, these risers are the exact same size. So I've been able to use one of these risers as a template to draw a circle on the foam board. I'm then going to use my jigsaw to cut this out, making sure I don't cut too tight onto the line. I can come out just a little bit, just for a little bit of space, but that gives me a nice clean size for the circle. All right, so I got the first sheet of foam board cut out. I had to cut out the holes, not only for the covers, but also for those little loops of wire you can see in there as well. That was actually not too bad. Using the template for the riser worked really, really well. My cuts with the jigsaw were super easy. So that sheet is now on. I've decided to go ahead and install these risers on top of the tank here. I thought that the risers were going to get screwed through from the outside, kind of through here somewhere, but actually looking inside, you can see that the mounting holes are over here on the inside. So what that means is I can remove this again if I need to, even once the insulation is installed. Normally that might be a bit of a challenge because of this lip here on the bottom. This is actually wider than the cutout that I made in the foam board. But I'm actually going to go ahead and remove this lip. You may be wondering why. Well, this is a good example of why it's really important to read the instructions and talk to people who know what they're doing. I would probably have missed this one. It is actually written on the lip around the bottom here. And even though I know it's here, it's still hard to find. But down here, it says, tear off this ring in a frost-prone area. So here in Vermont, we are very much a frost-prone area. And I spoke to the person at the company that I bought this from, and he pointed this out to me. And I'm glad he did, because like I said, I think I might have missed that otherwise. Basically, once I've got it screwed in, what I'm going to do is use a shovel and knock off that ring around the outside. And the reason for that is that in a frost-prone area like ours, we are susceptible to what's called heave. And this is where the ground, as it freezes, will grab hold of something that is in the ground and try and lift it up. It would grab hold of that lip and try and push this up. Now, in reality, given the location, how it's installed and everything else, it's not going to lift up an 8,000-pound tank, especially, well, even heavier once it's full of liquid. But it could start to damage that ring. It could start to stress that plastic. This is an issue that we have to deal with time and time again. Later on, we're going to be installing some concrete piers for the utility building. And there as well, we have to think really carefully about frost heave and making sure that the frost can't grab hold of those piers and lift them up. A couple of ways to do this. One is you can flare the base, so it kind of goes in at an angle like that, and that way the frost can't get hold of it because it's narrow as it goes further up. The other way of doing it is to actually sleeve the post with something, some plastic or something like that, and the frost can't grip hold of that plastic. So I'm going to install these rings now, these risers, get them in position, and then knock off that base. Okay, so I have the 12-inch riser and the 6-inch riser installed. It was 8 screws in each layer, so 16 screws total. They came with the risers. Oh, and I've also broken off the tab on each one. The 6-inch riser was really easy. That came off real quick. The 12, when it hits these little indentations, it was really hard to do because I couldn't just slide the shovel down the side. So I ended up using a knife just to clean that up a little bit down there. It doesn't matter too much, but I wanted it to be a little neater than it was with just the shovel. You'll notice that I've installed the 12-inch and then the 6-inch on top of that. And that was a specific decision. That wasn't just randomly chosen. And the reason was because of this. This is the safety cover, the childproof cover that goes in. And that just drops inside there like that. And what it means is if, when the cover is off for maintenance or clearance or anything, there's no chance of someone falling in. And that's really important because septic tanks are incredibly dangerous. A lot of the gases that come off them when they're being serviced can asphyxiate you really quickly. And if you're leaning over and you lose consciousness, there's a good chance you will fall in, and that can be very quickly fatal. So this cover is designed to provide some safety, And the way that that goes in is like you saw me just put it in there. It just rests on that inner lip that's around the edge there. So there's nothing, it doesn't get screwed in or held in or anything else. It just rests in place like that. And then the lid goes on top of that. It rests at the bottom of the riser. The 6-inch riser is shorter than the 12, so the cover sits higher up. If I had the 12 at the top, that would sit about 12 inches down from the top, not 6 inches down from the top. Well, there we go. That is the septic tank with the foam insulation board. That is a piece of 2-inch XPS. We're trying not to use too much foam board. It's not the greatest material to be burying in the ground. It doesn't decompose, and it's not particularly nice in terms of the environmental impacts when it's being made. Next up will be a similar task with the pump tank. The cover here will not get a riser. That's going to get buried, that one. And obviously that's already got a riser on. We're going to leave that tall until it's all been filled here and covered in the topsoil, and then we will cut it to the appropriate height. That one doesn't need a riser, because if anything goes wrong there, these are 24-inch covers and risers diameter. That is a 30-inch diameter. So talking to the company that makes this weed precast, they're also the kind of people that we would call if we had a problem. What they said is if they were called out and there were a problem with the inlet in there, which is going to be the end of the pipe coming from the septic tank to the pump tank, they said if there was a problem under there, they wouldn't really even bother going through a riser and a cover there. They would probably just go through from this one because it's a straight shot across. Or if they really needed to, they could get in through the 30-inch one there, because that is large enough to get through. Not maybe a fun job, given it will be full of stuff, but nonetheless, they can get in if necessary. And what he said is he just wouldn't bother putting that riser on. They are quite expensive. I think the 12-inch pieces were about $70 or so each, and the 6-inch pieces were about $40. So each one of those is $110. So we saved some money by not putting it in there.